Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into something, frankly, a bit surprising. We're talking about how whale urination, yes, whale pee, is actually vital for ocean health.
Exactly. It sounds mundane, maybe, but it's incredibly important. We often hear about the whale pump effect from feces.
Right, the poop gets a lot of attention.
It does. But this recent research, published in Nature Communications, really shines a light on urine. It suggests it's just as significant, maybe even more so, for getting key nutrients into marine ecosystems.
So, whale pee, not exactly glamorous, but our mission for you today is to understand how this basic biological function is so crucial for a thriving ocean, and importantly, what this tells us about protecting these amazing animals. Okay, let's get into it. First off, the scale. I mean, how much are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, the volume is, well, it's pretty staggering. Think about a large baleen whale, like a fin whale.
Okay, big whale.
Huge. It can excrete over 250 gallons of urine every single day.
250 gallons a day.
A day. Researchers described watching it happen. They called it a golden smoke bomb underwater.
A golden smoke bomb.
Yeah. It apparently turns the water around it kind of greenish. It gives you a sense of the immediate impact.
That image definitely paints a picture. So it's clearly a massive amount, not just a tiny bit. But what's in it? What makes this volume so ecologically important?
It comes down to the nutrients, specifically high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus.
Nitrogen and phosphorus. Okay, basic chemistry building blocks.
Exactly. And they're in forms that are readily usable by other organisms. These are essential for pretty much all life. They're especially critical for phytoplankton.
Ah, phytoplankton. The tiny microscopic plants and bacteria at the bottom of the food chain, right?
Precisely. They're the base. They power almost everything else in the ocean.
So this regular release of whale urine is like fertilizing the surface waters.
That's a great way to put it. It acts as a potent natural fertilizer. It directly stimulates phytoplankton growth right there at the surface.
And more phytoplankton means?
More food for zooplankton, which then feeds small fish, and it goes right on up the food web to the bigger fish, marine mammals, seabirds. Plus, as the water mixes, currents and waves, these nutrients also get transported down, enriching deeper parts of the ocean too.
It's incredible, a constant mobile source of fertilization. Now, this study focused on baleen whales, right? The big filter feeders, grays, blues, humpbacks, fin whales. How do their massive migrations fit into this picture?
Well, that's where it gets really fascinating, ecologically speaking. These whales undertake these huge journeys every year.
Right, polar to tropics, generally.
Typically, yeah. They spend summers feeding in really nutrient-rich polar waters. Lots of krill, lots of small fish. They build up massive energy reserves. They're blubber.
Okay, bulking up.
Exactly. Then they migrate thousands of miles to warmer, often tropical waters for the winter. And these tropical waters are usually quite low in nutrients.
Sort of like ocean deserts, nutrient-wise?
In many ways, yes. Much less productive than the polar regions. And this is where they breed and calve.
And all along this massive journey, they're urinating.
Constantly.
Yeah.
So they're effectively picking up nutrients in bulk in the feeding grounds.
And then distributing them bit by bit all the way to these nutrient-poor breeding areas, like giant swimming nutrient tankers.
That's a perfect analogy. Yeah. They really are. And there's another layer to it. When they're in those warmer breeding waters, they're mostly fasting, right? They're living off those fat reserves.
Burning through the blubber they stored up.
Right. And the process of breaking down that blubber and even muscle tissue for energy releases nitrogen as a waste product.
Oh, interesting. So the very act of surviving there produces more nitrogen waste.
Exactly, which then gets concentrated and released in their urine. So urination might actually increase, or at least the nitrogen concentration might, during this fasting period in nutrient-poor areas.
Wow. So they're fertilizing the areas most in need, partly fueled by their own body reserves. That's quite a system. How does this urine contribution stack up against other whales add nutrients, like when a whale dies and sinks, the whale fall, or placentas after birth?
Good question. The study looked at that. And while things like whale falls are incredibly important for deep-sea ecosystems, creating unique habitats.
Right, a totally different kind of impact.
Yeah. But for widespread nutrient input, especially nitrogen in those upper sunlit waters, urine seems to be the dominant source from living whales.
Really?
Wow.
More than poop even for nitrogen?
For nitrogen specifically, yes. The study crunched some numbers. They estimated baleen whales release about 3,784 tons of nitrogen annually into these low nutrient areas.
Almost 4,000 tons of nitrogen.
Yeah. and a huge amount of organic matter overall, something like 46,500 tons. But urine is tagged as the primary vehicle for that crucial nitrogen component.
Those numbers are just huge. It really drives home that these animals aren't just swimming through the ocean, they're actively shaping its chemistry. Did the study compare this whale-driven nutrient transport to, say, what wind or currents do naturally?
It did, yeah. And in some specific places, the impact is remarkable, for instance, around Hawaii. The research suggests that the amount of nitrogen brought into that ecosystem by migrating whales exceeds the amount brought in by wind and ocean currents combined.
More than wind and currents, wow.
It really highlights their role, doesn't it? Especially in specific, important locations like breeding grounds.
It absolutely does. Which makes you think about the past. What did historical whaling do to this whole system?
Well, that's the sobering part. The researchers estimated that before industrial whaling decimated global whale populations.
Which was truly devastating.
Absolutely. Before that, the total nutrient contribution from these whales was likely around 3 times higher than it is today.
3 times. We essentially switched off a massive natural ocean fertilization system.
To a large extent, yes. We
Yeah.
drastically reduced the number of these nutrient tankers operating globally.
And even though commercial whaling was banned back in, 1986?
Correct. The international moratorium.
Whales still face a lot of threats today, don't they? It's not like the problem is solved.
Far from it, sadly. They still face serious dangers. Things like being hit by ships, vessel strikes, getting entangled in fishing gear.
Entanglement, yeah, that's a big one.
Huge. And then there's pollution, chemical pollution, noise pollution, and of course the overarching impacts of climate change affecting their food sources, their habitats, migration patterns.
So the recovery is slow and still threatened. And based on this research, the consequences of not recovering these populations, they go way beyond just the whales themselves.
Absolutely. The study uses this really vivid analogy. It describes an ocean without these vital whale processes like nutrient cycling as spluttering along like an old car with rusty parts.
Okay, that paints a picture. An ecosystem struggling to function properly.
Exactly. It highlights how interconnected everything is. Heidi Pearson, a marine biologist who works on these kinds of topics, put it very simply. The ocean would be a very different place without whale poo or urine.
Simple but profound. It really connects whale health directly to the health of the entire marine ecosystem.
Deeply connected.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. The big takeaway here seems to be that whale pee, this thing we probably never think about, is actually a surprisingly powerful engine driving ocean health.
That's in a nutshell. It's a critical mechanism for distributing essential nutrients, especially nitrogen, across vast distances, fertilizing the base of the food web.
Which means protecting whales isn't just about saving an iconic species, however important that is.
No, it's much broader. It's fundamentally about maintaining a resilient, productive global ocean. An ocean that, ultimately supports us all.
This whole deep dive really changes how you might look at a whale breaching, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, how many other ecological processes, maybe driven by seemingly small actions of individual creatures, are having these enormous hidden impacts on our planet? What else are we only just starting to understand? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for exploring the depths with us today.